Isla Marin hung like a teardrop in the sky, smaller than the main archipelago and shrouded in perpetual mist. As Nyx descended through the cloud layer, Julian caught glimpses of a structure unlike the grand architecture of the council chambers. This building was older, more organic, as if grown rather than constructed. The auxiliary chamber, Nyx explained, wings adjusting for their final approach. Built during the first age of flight, before we mastered current technologies. Few remember it exists. They landed on a narrow platform jutting from the island's edge. Julian's legs wobbled slightly as Nyx set him down, his body still humming with adrenaline. "Stay close," she murmured, her wings partially extended in a protective posture. "Even here, we can't be certain who to trust." The entrance was a simple archway carved into living stone, illuminated by bioluminescent moss that cast everything in a soft blue glow. No guards stood watch, either a sign of secrecy or a trap waiting to be sprung. Julian clutched the crystal, its pulsing having grown more insistent as they approached the chamber. "It's reacting to something." Nyx nodded, her amber eyes reflecting the blue light. The chamber was built on a nexus of ancient energy. The same energy that powers the memory crystals. They proceeded cautiously through winding corridors that seemed to spiral organically through the heart of the floating island. Julian noted detailed murals covering the walls, depictions of winged figures battling shadowy enemies amid stars and planets he didn't recognize. "Your history," he said softly. "The parts we remember," Nyx replied. "And some we've tried to forget." The corridor opened into a circular space dominated by a ring of stone seats. In the center, a pool of what appeared to be liquid light rippled gently. 3 elders waited, Serena in the center, flanked by 2 others Julian didn't recognize. Notably absent was Elder Tarek. Guardian Nyx, Serena greeted formally. Human diplomat Reed. "Your journey here was not observed." "We took precautions," Nyx answered, inclining her head respectfully. The battle above provided adequate distraction. Serena's silver-feathered wings rustled. "The situation has deteriorated. 2 of our defense platforms have fallen. Your vessel, Human, continues to fight alongside our forces, but they are outmatched." Julian stepped forward. "Then we need to act quickly. The crystal contains tactical data that could turn the tide." "So you claim," said one of the other elders, his plumage a deep russet. "Yet we have only your word that these attackers are truly Valkyrie. They could be any opportunistic raiders." Nyx's feathers bristled slightly. "The evidence is clear to those willing to see it, Elder Branth. Their technology signatures, their tactics, all match ancestral records. Records few have access to," countered the elder. "Records your family has jealously guarded for generations." Julian sensed the undercurrent of old political tensions and stepped forward. "With respect, Elder, the Valkyrie specifically targeted this crystal in their attack. They know what it contains, and they fear it." Serena raised a hand, silencing further debate. "Show us." Julian approached the pool of light, the crystal now pulsing rapidly in his hand. He hesitated, looking to Nyx. "Place it in the confluence," she instructed. "The chamber will amplify its contents." As Julian lowered the crystal into the luminous pool, a sudden tremor shook the chamber. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. "They've found us," the 3rd elder said, rising in alarm. "Impossible," Nyx replied, wings flaring. "No one knew our destination except." The realization hit them simultaneously. Julian met Nyx's eyes across the pool. "Tarek." Before anyone could respond, the crystal fully submerged, and the pool erupted in a column of light. Images formed within the brilliance, star charts, weapon schematics, battle formations, and faces of creatures Julian had never seen before. Tall, angular beings with multiple eyes and segmented limbs moved within the projection, their movements jerky yet precise. "The Valkyrie," Serena breathed. "Just as the legends described." The images shifted, showing the same creatures interfacing with technology that melded with their bodies. Data streams in an alien language flowed alongside the visuals. "They're biomechanical," Julian observed. "Part organic, part machine. And highly adaptable," Nyx added. "That's how they survived all these centuries, by integrating with their technology until the distinction became meaningless." Another tremor, stronger this time, rocked the chamber. A section of ceiling collapsed nearby, narrowly missing Elder Branth. We must evacuate, Serena decided. This information is too valuable to lose. Julian reached for the crystal, but Nyx caught his wrist. Wait. There's more it needs to show us. The projection had shifted again, focusing now on a particular Valkyrie, larger than the others, with a headdress of metallic appendages that writhed like living things. The prophet, Nyx whispered. Text appeared beside the figure, ancient Aryan script that Julian couldn't read. Nyx's breath caught. What is it? Julian asked urgently. A vulnerability, she replied, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. The prophet isn't just their leader, it's their central node. All Valkyrie ships and warriors are networked through its consciousness. Destroy the prophet. And the entire invasion force falls, Julian finished. A massive explosion above them sent larger chunks of ceiling crashing down. The elders scattered, seeking shelter along the chamber's edges. We need to go. Serena shouted. Guardian, secure the crystal. Nyx plunged her hand into the pool, retrieving the crystal as the projection collapsed. As her fingers closed around it, Julian saw her body go rigid, her eyes widening in what might have been pain or revelation. Nyx, he moved to her side, concerned. She blinked rapidly, then focused on his face. I saw it. The prophet's vessel. It's holding position above the main council chamber, directing the attack but not participating. Cowardly but strategic, Julian noted. How do we reach it? Another explosion, and part of the chamber's outer wall collapsed, revealing the battle raging in the skies. Through the gap, Julian could see the horizon limping through the clouds, pursued by a Valkyrie ship. My squadron, Nyx said suddenly. If they've survived, they can help us reach the prophet's vessel. And if they haven't? Her amber eyes gleamed with fierce determination. Then we go alone. Serena approached them, her dignified posture maintained despite the chaos. The Council will authorize full defensive measures based on this evidence. But reaching the prophet may be beyond our capabilities now. Not beyond mine, Nyx stated with absolute conviction. She turned to Julian. Are you with me? Julian didn't hesitate. Always. A new tremor shook the island, this one different, not from an explosion but from some deeper instability. The elders exchanged alarmed glances. The island's gravitational tethers are failing, Branth announced. We have minutes before it begins to fall. Go, Serena urged them. We'll evacuate the elders in the auxiliary craft. Guardian Nyx, the fate of our people may rest on your wings now. Nyx nodded solemnly, then turned to Julian. Ready for another flight? Do I have a choice? He asked with a wry smile. Always, she replied seriously. But I hope you choose to stay with me. Julian stepped closer, meeting her gaze. I think I made that choice the moment you first tossed me onto those pillows. A flutter passed through her feathers, embarrassment, amusement, or perhaps something deeper. Without another word, she secured the crystal in a pouch at her waist, then gathered Julian in her arms. They launched through the ruined wall into chaos. The sky around them blazed with energy weapons and burning debris. Julian spotted the horizon in the distance, its shields flickering as it continued to evade and return fire. We need to contact your ship, Nyx shouted over the wind. If we coordinate, we might have a chance against the prophet's vessel. Julian activated his communicator, searching for the horizon's frequency amid the interference. When Captain Devana's voice finally crackled through, it was strained but resolute. Read. Status report. Captain, we've identified the enemy leadership. A central vessel above the main archipelago, the prophet's ship. All Valkyrie forces are networked through it. If we can disable or destroy it, the entire invasion force will collapse. A pause, then, bold plan, diplomat. But the horizon is in no condition for a frontal assault. Not asking for one, Julian replied. We need a distraction. Something to draw their fire while Guardian Nyx and I infiltrate the vessel. Guardian Nyx? Devana questioned. The winged warrior currently keeping me from plummeting to my death, Julian explained, unable to keep a touch of affection from his voice. She's been more helpful than the entire diplomatic corps. Noted, Devana said dryly. And what exactly do you plan to do once aboard their vessel? Ask them nicely to leave. Julian glanced at the pouch containing the crystal. We have the means to disrupt their network. But we need to get close enough to use it. Another explosion lit up the sky as one of the Valkyrie attack ships took a direct hit from an Aryan defense platform. It spiraled downward, trailing smoke and fire. Coordinates received, Davana confirmed after a moment. We'll make our approach in 5 minutes. That's all the distraction we can offer before we'll need to retreat to safer altitude. Understood. Thank you, Captain. As the communication ended, Nyx banked sharply to avoid debris from the falling Valkyrie ship. Julian held tighter to her, feeling the powerful muscles of her wings working against the turbulent air. Your captain agrees to this suicide mission? Nyx asked, voice raised over the wind. She knows I wouldn't suggest it if there were a better option, Julian replied. Besides, diplomats are supposed to take risks for peace. This is well beyond diplomacy, Nyx observed. Julian smiled against her feathers. So is throwing me onto pillows every time I speak. She made that chirping laugh sound that he'd grown fond of. Perhaps my methods were unorthodox, but they kept you safe, didn't they? As they soared higher, the full scope of the battle became apparent. The once peaceful Aryan archipelago was now a war zone, with skiffs and ships engaged in deadly dances amid the floating islands. Several smaller islands were damaged or listing, their gravitational tethers failing. In the distance, Julian spotted their target, a massive, angular vessel unlike the smaller attack craft. It hovered above the main council island, surrounded by a defensive screen of fighters. There, he pointed. The Prophet's ship. Nyx nodded, her expression grim. Once your vessel creates the distraction, we'll need to approach from below. Their sensors are weakest at the ventral juncture. How do you know that? Her wings tensed beneath his touch. The crystal showed me. When I retrieved it, I saw more than just images. I experienced memories, my ancestors' knowledge of Valkyrie weaknesses. Julian studied her face, noting the subtle changes in her expression. Nyx, what aren't you telling me? She hesitated, then spoke softly. The crystal contains more than tactical data. It holds a weapon, a virus designed to disrupt the Valkyrie network. But deploying it requires a living conduit. Understanding dawned on Julian with horrifying clarity. You're planning to use yourself to deploy the weapon. She didn't deny it. My ancestor did the same. It's why the knowledge is bound to our bloodline, the neural patterns are compatible with the virus. And what happened to your ancestor? Julian demanded, though he suspected he already knew. Nyx's silence was answer enough. No, Julian said firmly. We'll find another way. There is no other way, she replied. This is why I was born with these markings, why I was trained as a guardian. It's my purpose. Julian wanted to argue further, but a sudden burst of activity near the Prophet's vessel caught their attention. The horizon had begun its approach, weapons blazing as it drew fire from the defensive screen. That's our window, Nyx said. Ready. Julian tightened his grip on her, mind racing for alternatives, for arguments that might dissuade her from what amounted to a suicide mission. But the determination in her eyes told him she wouldn't be swayed easily. I'm ready, he answered. But this isn't over. She swooped downward, using cloud cover and the chaos of battle to approach the underside of the massive Valkyrie vessel. The ship's surface was oddly textured, more like living tissue than metal, with pulsing lines of energy running through it like veins. There, Nyx pointed to a recessed area that might have been an access port. We can enter there. As they drew closer, Julian noticed the port was guarded by what appeared to be automated defenses, small, drone-like extensions of the ship itself. I'll handle them, Nyx said, releasing one arm from around Julian to draw her weapon. Hold on, Julian interrupted, pulling out his diplomatic translator. These are biomechanical systems, right? What if we speak their language instead of shooting? Nyx hesitated. You think you can communicate with ship defenses? Worth trying before we announce our presence with weapons fire. Julian adjusted the translator, inputting patterns he'd observed in the crystal's projections. As they approached the access port, he directed the device toward the drone guards. The translator emitted a series of clicks, whirs, and electronic tones. To Julian's surprise, and evident relief, the drones retracted into the ship's surface, leaving the port unguarded. How did you know that would work? Nyx asked, impressed. I didn't, Julian admitted. But diplomacy is about finding common language, even with defensive systems. They slipped through the access port into a pulsing, organic corridor. The interior of the Valkyrie vessel was even more unsettling than its exterior, walls that breathed, floors that seemed to adjust to their weight, and an ambient sound like distant whispers. The Prophet will be in the central chamber, Nyx whispered, leading the way through the living maze. We need to move quickly before they detect us. They encountered surprisingly little resistance as they navigated deeper into the vessel. Julian couldn't shake the feeling they were being allowed to proceed, a sensation that only grew stronger when they reached a massive door that opened at their approach. Beyond lay a cavernous space dominated by a raised platform. Atop it stood the Prophet, identical to the projection they'd seen, but more imposing in person. Its multiple eyes swiveled toward them, and the metallic appendages on its head writhed with apparent agitation. Skyborn, the Prophet spoke, its voice a discordant blend of organic and synthetic tones. And human. We anticipated your arrival. Julian felt Nyx tense beside him, her wings spreading slightly in a defensive posture. Then you know why we're here, she replied, hand moving toward the pouch containing the crystal. The Prophet's appendages rippled. To repeat the mistakes of the past. To deploy a weapon you barely understand against an enemy you comprehend even less. We understand enough, Julian interjected. You want to pit our peoples against each other, to weaken us before conquest. Conquest. The Prophet made a sound that might have been laughter. How limited your perspective. We do not conquer. We integrate. We preserve. It gestured with a segmented limb, and the walls of the chamber transformed into viewing screens showing countless worlds, some thriving, others dead or dying. For millennia, we have watched species rise, war among themselves, and fall to extinction. We have preserved what would otherwise be lost. We are the memory of the galaxy. By force, Nyx challenged. By subsuming other cultures into your network. By saving them from their own destructive impulses, the Prophet countered. As we once tried to save your ancestors, Skyborn. They refused our gift. They deployed their weapon, at great cost. And what did they achieve? Merely delay. Julian studied the images on the walls, recognition dawning. These aren't conquered worlds. They're endangered ones. Your archivists. The Prophet's attention shifted fully to Julian. The human understands. Yes, we preserve what would be lost. Knowledge, culture, genetic diversity, all catalogued within our collective. When species destroy themselves, as they inevitably do, something of them remains within us. And those who don't wish to be preserved? Nyx demanded. Often misunderstand our purpose, the Prophet replied. As your ancestors did. As you do now. The crystal you carry was not designed as a weapon, Skyborn. It was a key, an interface between our network and your consciousness. Your ancestor used it incorrectly, twisting its purpose to rejection rather than integration. Julian's diplomatic instincts surged to the forefront. He stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Nyx's arm. If your intentions are preservation, why attack? Why the deception? The Prophet's appendages stilled. Because your kind fears what it does not understand. When fear rules, communication fails. We needed to create circumstances where the crystal would be activated, where its true purpose might be realized. Nyx bristled. By firing on innocent people. By destroying our islands. Regrettable but calculated damage, the Prophet responded. No life-bearing island was targeted. No Aryan or human life was intended to be lost. We sought only to create the necessary crisis. Julian processed this information rapidly, his trained mind seeking connections and solutions. You wanted us to find the crystal. To bring it here. Yes. Why now? Nyx demanded. Why return after centuries? The Prophet gestured again, and the viewing screens shifted to show Earth and Airy Haven, surrounded by data streams that Julian couldn't decipher. Because both your worlds approach critical junctures. Technological advances that will either elevate or destroy you. We have seen this pattern countless times. We offer an alternative to extinction. Julian felt the diplomatic ground shifting beneath him. What had seemed a clear case of invasion now appeared more complex, still troubling, still problematic, but not the straightforward enemy they'd imagined. He turned to Nyx, whose expression reflected her internal struggle. "The crystal," he said softly. "What if it isn't what we thought?" She met his gaze, amber eyes troubled. "My entire life, I've believed it was our salvation, our defense against monsters. What if that belief was wrong?" The prophet moved closer, its movements oddly graceful despite its alien form. "The choice remains yours, Skyborn. As it was your ancestors. The crystal can connect our networks, allowing exchange rather than dominance. Or it can be used as before, to sever, to reject, to isolate." Nyx withdrew the crystal from its pouch. It pulsed more rapidly now, resonating with something in the chamber. "If I choose connection, what happens to my people? To humans? They continue their own paths, but with access to our collected knowledge. With warnings about paths that have led others to ruin. With options beyond their current limitations. And if I refuse?" The prophet's appendages rippled. "Then we withdraw, as before. We wait and watch. Perhaps for another millennium. Perhaps until it is too late." Julian stepped closer to Nyx, not touching her but present, supportive. "Whatever you decide," he said quietly, "I'm with you." She looked at him, something vulnerable showing through her fierce exterior. "Even if I choose wrong?" "There is no wrong choice here," he replied. "Only different paths. Different futures." Nyx looked down at the crystal, then at the prophet, then back to Julian. In her eyes, he saw not just determination or doubt, but something deeper, trust, affection, and a question she couldn't voice aloud. Julian nodded slightly, answering her unspoken query. "Yes, whatever comes next, we face it together." She turned back to the prophet. "I need assurances. Proof that connection doesn't mean submission. That my people, and his, retain their autonomy." "The proof is in the connection itself," the prophet replied. "Experience it, then decide. The interface is temporary until confirmed." Nyx hesitated one final moment, then extended the crystal toward the prophet. As the two made contact, the crystal's pulsing light intensified, spreading up Nyx's arm and across her body. Her wings flared wide, and her eyes glowed with the same blue luminescence. Julian watched anxiously, ready to intervene though he had no idea how he possibly could against such technology. For several tense moments, Nyx remained frozen, her body rigid as data flowed visibly through her. Then, suddenly, she gasped and stumbled backward. Julian caught her, supporting her weight as her wings folded limply against her back. "Nyx. Are you all right?" Her eyes gradually returned to their normal amber hue. She looked at him, then at the prophet, then back to Julian. A slow smile spread across her face, not her usual predatory grin, but something softer, filled with wonder. "I saw it," she whispered. "Everything. Thousands of worlds, millions of years of knowledge. And it's beautiful." The prophet's appendages rippled in what might have been satisfaction. "Your ancestors saw only threat where you see potential. This is progress." Nyx straightened, regaining her composure though she kept close to Julian. "I'll agree to limited interface, a trial period where our peoples can access your knowledge but remain separate from your network. If that proves beneficial, we can discuss deeper integration." "Acceptable," the prophet agreed. "The diplomat's presence suggests humans may be similarly receptive." Julian, ever the negotiator, seized the opportunity. "We would need to proceed carefully. Cultural exchange before technological integration. Trust must be built." "As it should be," the prophet acknowledged. "Time moves differently for us than for your kinds. We can be patient." As if on cue, the viewing screens showed the battle outside subsiding, Valkyrie vessels withdrawing from engagement with both Aryan and human ships. "A gesture of good faith," the prophet explained. "The first of many." The crystal in Nyx's hand had dimmed to a gentle pulse, synchronized now with similar lights throughout the chamber. She looked at Julian, her expression complex but hopeful. "Did we just negotiate peace instead of fighting a war?" she asked softly. Julian smiled. "Turns out I am a diplomat after all." Her free hand found his, claws carefully retracted as she entwined their fingers. "And I'm still a guardian. Some things don't change." "Speaking of which," Julian said, raising an eyebrow, "does this mean you'll stop throwing me onto pillows every time I speak?" The familiar mischievous gleam returned to her eyes. No, human. That tradition continues, though perhaps for different reasons now. The prophet, observing their exchange, made a sound that might have been amusement. Unexpected bonds are often the strongest. This, too, we have observed across countless worlds. As they prepared to leave the Valkyrie vessel, arrangements made for formal discussions between all three species, Julian felt a weight lift from his shoulders. What had begun as a diplomatic mission gone catastrophically wrong had transformed into something unprecedented, a three-way alliance with potential benefits beyond imagination. But more importantly, he had found something he hadn't even known he was seeking, a connection that transcended species, planets, and cultural divides. Later, as they soared back toward the healing Aryan archipelago, the horizon following at a respectful distance, Nyx held Julian close against the high-altitude chill. "Your people will adapt to this new reality?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. Julian nodded against her feathers. "Humans are surprisingly flexible. We've been searching the stars for other intelligence for centuries. Finding it, even in unexpected forms, fulfills a deep longing." "And what about your personal longings, diplomat?" she asked, her tone shifting to that teasing purr he'd grown so fond of. "Now that peace is secured, will you return to Earth?" Julian looked up at her face, backlit by the setting sun, her feathers glowing gold and her eyes reflecting the endless sky. "I think," he said carefully, "that Earth can spare one diplomat for extended cultural exchange. After all, there's still so much I don't understand about Aryan customs." "Like the pillow ritual," she suggested innocently. "Exactly like that," he agreed, unable to suppress his smile. "I may need years of thorough research." Nyx's wings caught an updraft, carrying them higher into the golden clouds. "Fortunately," she murmured, her beak brushing gently against his forehead in what he now recognized as an Aryan kiss, "I have plenty of pillows." As they soared through the amber light, Julian reflected that perhaps the most profound diplomacy happened not in council chambers or formal negotiations, but in the unexpected moments between individuals brave enough to catch each other when they fall. And sometimes, when necessary, to toss each other into pillows.